Hi.
Well, Nora, we've known each other for a long time. I've been a huge admirer of your work, your art, and you've produced really a magnificent, unique film. I think that many of us are aware of the genre of the war film, but in some ways you've created this pre-war film. And it's really exceptional because you have a sense at so many different levels of this horrible event that's about to happen, but you tell it so subtly and you tell it with such extraordinary sense of artistry and sensitivity. It's really remarkable. But before we get into the film, maybe you could talk about your journey and really how you found yourself in this place. I know that you were born in Armenia, but you left to study to become a painter, an artist. And if you can maybe just give us a brief sense of how you have come to this point in your own development.
Thank you very much for this flattering introduction. I couldn't have imagined that you would be speaking like this about my film. We indeed know each other since quite some time, since the first steps that I made trying to finance and write this film. It all started in 2009. I was considering myself an artist and I didn't have the ambition to make a feature film before meeting this territory, this place, and before asking myself a question, what is the most possible way for me to tell this story, the space, the history of the country and its situation, which is, as you said, the country which is placed on the volcano. So I tried to write a narration which would be honest with my historical ideas about the place, but also with what physically I felt there. And I tried by all means avoid war film because I don't feel comfortable making war films. And trying to avoid a propaganda film, trying to avoid the happy end film, trying to be as close to the problematic of the country, the Artsakh, as I could understand it.
Yeah, this is what's really successful in the film, is that you have told the story of one of the most complex histories. It's almost impossible to give a brief history of it in the time that we have. Suffice it to say that it's a contested area, but it's not contested for the people who live there. They are deeply rooted there. And so you have managed in the story of a French national who comes to the country to actually inspect the single airport that exists. It's not a functioning airport. It's looking for some sort of certification. And the people there believe that once this French person gives this certification, it is the key to recognition, that somehow this will open the door to the borders being recognized. And it's a fantasy in some ways, but it is so deeply felt. And you have managed to capture something in this fable, I would say, which represents the aspirations of an entire a history, a community, a group of people living on this land, which was about to explode into war. I mean, you had your premiere in Paris the night before the war actually erupted. So you're very correct in saying that these are people living on a volcano. One of the characters says that actually to the French inspector. How did you come up with this amazing original fable, which is so rich? And it speaks so eloquently of this almost impossible political situation to describe. And you tell it through humanity. You tell it through these beautiful images. It's so carefully structured. And there's so many moments I could talk about which are really poetic, but it's at all moments very, very human and accessible to the viewer. How did you harness all of this? I mean, can you talk a little bit about the process?
Thank you. Uh, the thing was, the biggest challenge was to make a film where the country, the non-recognized contested territory, is the center. Mm-hmm. So when you have to draw something that nobody saw before, you have to take, I think, many precautions, because I had to draw with the film the mountains, the roads, the cities, the villages, the hopes, the fears, because the cinema didn't see this place before that film, the international cinema. And I didn't have one way of looking at this place, because I was there as Armenian, I was there as French, I was there as a filmmaker, I was there as a tourist, and I could see also this multiplicity of points of view of people living there or passing through this country or visiting. And I don't believe that there is one truth. I believe that there are many truths that construct kind of idea of this space. So it was very important for me to make a choral film, which is told through several characters, which are not standing exactly on the same place on the ground. And we enter the film with the French auditor who arrives to discover this airport, the only airport of the country. But we are not only in his point of view, because his point of view is narrow. And I try to complete it with several different views and understandings of what is it to be living on this land, and what are the hopes of this country.
And you have an exceptional performance from Grégoire Colline as well. I mean, it's amazing how restrained he is. And then there are these moments, for instance, where he sees his driver at a hospital where his son has just been born. And he's like, you see the wife on the balcony, and Grégoire Colline at this point smiles. It's the first time, maybe the only time we see him smile. And then later on, we see him going through the streets and buying a small baby's outfit. So we gather maybe that he is a new parent himself. It's so subtle. And it's really a beautiful entry into this character and into this performance. How did you think of him, and how did you work with him to get this very layered performance with so little actually being said about his life?
It was also part of my fight for the financing, because the financiers wanted to have a psychological character. Though I didn't need to speak about psychology of my main character, I needed the psychology of my character allow my viewer to enter the country and to understand the country. So I didn't need to have his backstory. So I saw Grégoire Colline as everybody in the films of Claire Denis, where he has a very, let's say, material structure. He is also there is something tough in his, in the way how he is, in his material. And in fact, when we met for the first time in Paris, it was clear for me that it would be him. And it's not because I wanted him to become Alain Delage, but I wanted him, Grégoire Colline, the human being that he is, to make this trip with me and to help me discover who can be this Alain Delage. So it was really a trip that we made together, and we constructed this character together. And this very settled way of playing, it's because also he was respecting the environment in which he was. He was not playing, King Lear there. He was, he was meeting a country, and he had enough of intelligence and settleness to understand that it's not the moment to make the big gestures. Everything should be very content. And he also made this kind of a note, the right note for all the actors to play in a very reserved way.
Yes.
So as you said, everybody is playing in a very reserved way, though the Armenian characters, the four main characters, are theater actors. So naturally, they would perform stronger. And they are also not actors playing in the film. So, you know, this balance between the actors and not actors, I think we tried to settle everything to like a very, let's say, low note and not very performative acting.
And thus the emotions are there, but they're hidden. And I think the pressures that are on Grégoire's character are immense. These people have such aspirations. They believe that he's going to determine their fate. And there's this incredible conversation with the director of the airport and Grégoire Collin at a table. And the whole history of the Armenian people is actually expressed in this very brief dialogue. I was really so moved by this, that you were able to say so much in such minimal means, but because of the quality of the performances, and you know, it's transmitted to the viewer effortlessly and deeply. And you're right, it's because it's so restrained that it allows us entry. It's really a strong accomplishment. And I really salute that. It's really beautiful to see this. There's so much pressure on Grégoire's character, and he's able to modulate this, and it ends up in this incredible decision he makes to define the border himself, to see where it is. And can you talk about, just dramaturgically, how you structured this idea of the exterior border, which is very mysterious, and this internal kind of space of the airport? There's a sculptural sense in how you're working with the performances, how you're working with the cinematography, the landscape, between this inner core and this mysterious outer core. How did you balance that? How did you harness all of those energies?
Yeah, as we were saying in the beginning, the challenge was to draw a country. What does it mean, a country? It means a space which is surrounded by the border. And the narration tells that this border is very dangerous. So all the movements, all the camera movements and the narrative movements, they are taking place to define these borders. So from the beginning of the film, we hear about the borders. We know that they are the borders. And inside of this space, which is defined by these borders, in the center, there is the airport. And in the airport, there is the man, Grégoire Collin, the auditor. And the auditor is also, every time he's crossing small fences and little barriers, which is also his interior trip. As you said, the first time he smiles, he crosses a small barrier. First time he leaves his main path to get away from the runway into the bushes and the grass, he's crossing another small border, another small barrier. And each of these barriers, there are his interior barriers, which are graphically drawn inside of this country, which the film is depicting, until getting to this border that we would never see, but which is also his inside limit. And until punching into this limit and provoking military response. So you are right, there are those two roads. There are the borders, there are the physical borders that we never see, but there are also interior borders that we, I think, guess with the main character.
Yeah, and this is what makes the film unique. It's this exploration of a place that's about to explode. And it did explode, you know, as you know, as I said, you know, we had a terrible war in this Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, where we had this where we lost so many lives, and this film charts this moment before this violence, and we know it's there. We hear it mentioned as a volcano that could explode at any point. And this film could not have been made now, of course, because many of the places it's showing are now gone. They've been captured, and it's heartbreaking to watch it. But it's this exceptional record, and I think quite unique in cinema, where we see this this space right before this eruption happening, but from so many different perspectives, from a European outsider perspective, from the perspective of the people living there, different generations, and throughout there's this theme of simulation. You know, there's this idea of these young children who are preparing for war, playing war, actually creating this fire which threatens the audit of the airport. But then there's the simulation of the arrival of the plane that Gregoire's character is mapping. So this idea that something is about to happen and it's being imagined in the minds of the characters. So that's something that was really important for you to explore dramatically?
It is funny because when I was writing my director's intention note for the film, I was speaking about drawing this country, which doesn't have the recognition politically, but if the film would exist, it would have the recognition cinematographically. Mm-hmm. And one of the main things that I was trying to define in the film was this ability of people to believe in fiction, and to believe that strongly to the fiction that they maybe can change the reality. So this question of the fiction and the reality was very important in the film. So for example, this little boy who is carrying this, let's say, magical water, he believes so strongly, and people who drink it actually cures, because there is this idea of, fictioning the reality to make it more human, more respirable. And this is all about the country, and the country that I tried to depict, it hoped and it lived in this fiction. And, you are writing these beautiful phrases when you are making your intention note or you are making your sequences, and then the real reality, the military reality, which has nothing to do with other reality, because it's, I think, the most cruel one, entered the destiny, parallelly the destiny of the film. And there were no words anymore to speak about the hope, to speak about the fiction, because the reality was that cruel. And as you said, suddenly, from one day to another, the images of my film, the locations which are in my film, suddenly they became the front pages of the newspapers, with the military actions in front of the hospital, in front of the airport. So the reality entered and shortcutted the road of the film. And you are right, at the same time, it's so precious that we managed to make it before it all moved away.
Yeah. Well, one of the characters, the driver, says, there's no point in having land if you cannot cultivate the land. And in a strange way, as artists, there's no real point in having this space if we're not able to investigate it artistically and be able to map it through our own imagination, through your own imagination, through the imagination of your wonderful actors and your artistic collaborators. So you've charted this and you've cultivated it and you've preserved it. And it's a huge achievement, really, Nora. I can say, you know how I felt about this film from the beginning, but really, I'm so happy. It was really the first Armenian film for decades to be invited to Cannes, and and now it's in the official submission. And I think it's a unique piece of work that I hope it really does what, through cinema, something which is really precious and rare. As you said, it's able to chart and map and preserve, but also to convey the complexity of what it means to cultivate and the different levels of cultivation, which you've been able to show us and to explore.
Yeah, I think it's really paradoxical, because it is historical film, which was not made to be historical. So it is making history before the history was made. So it's a very curious thing, because, when you make a war film years after, or you make a film about an event, you have some time to think, you have some distance, you are on the side of the winners of or the losers, and you make the film from this point of view, or you write your novels from this point. Though Should the Wind Drop, it is before the history. So it's a very particular timing. And I think that is also, for me, makes the film vulnerable and at the same time very precious.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I think it's quite unparalleled that way. I think, as you said, it's a historical film before the history happens. And yet we see all the elements and dynamics of how that history is going to happen. And because of your closeness to the people, you know, you have these scenes, for instance, where there's a group of men who are celebrating the birth of the driver's child, and you can see that they're soldiers, and you can see their pride and their feeling that this new child will also be a soldier. You capture the spirit of the Armenian, you know, people, and because you are so close to that spirit, and yet you're able to also show, as I say, this outsider perspective as well. It's very unusual how you're able to, the alchemy of the film, you know, it's operating at so many different levels. And I really urge people to, it's immersive. It's an immersive experience. And, you know, there's a lot of films to watch at this time, but this is something quite unique. And I hope that people will understand that, you know, cinema can still chart these very particular places. And, you know, there's a lot of horror happening in the world right now. There's a lot of questions of territory and a lot of, extreme hostility. But this is an artistic work which looks at the core of what these questions are, and what is our human ability to share and communicate and express it. So I congratulate you, and really, we can talk forever. I mean, I feel like I made all of these notes, and I don't want to overwhelm the viewer or overwhelm you, but I just want to applaud you for your work.
Thank you very much, Atom. It's very precious that you accepted to speak about the film, and that we have this kind of possibly public conversation, as before we always had them in private. So it's thank you very much for accepting it.
Thank you.